Well, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us on Logistics Executive TV. Today we are talking aviation, express, and all things in between with a global specialist in this area, Matt Daniels. Matt has 30 odd years experience in across TNT, DHL, FedEx, and other global companies. He's based in Australia. And today we are talking about the latest developments with Amazon. Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kim. Great to be here.
Brilliant. So, folks, today we're going to talk about what we're driving through, the most consequential shifts, really, that's happening right now in the American logistics landscape. We're going to have a discussion about infrastructure, strategy, and the trillion-dollar company quietly taking over the front doorstep. Matt, you can give us a bit of an entree.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Look, I was quite excited putting this together, having worked in the US for over 6 years. I'm very familiar with the logistics landscape, the players, and what's happened really is remarkable. You know, in 2025, Amazon officially became the largest parcel carrier in the United States, and that's not by acquisition, not by partnership, not by building, but by station, driver by driver, and they have a new logistics empire from scratch. And the scale is staggering, actually. So Amazon delivered around 6.7 billion parcels in 2025. The US Postal Service, which, as we know, is America's default last mile carrier for the past 250 years, delivered 6.6 billion. And to put that into context, UPS came in at 4.4 billion and FedEx at 3.6 billion. And Amazon did this while growing at nearly 10% year over year at a time when USPS volumes fell about 8%, same with UPS. So the total US parcel market was essentially flat last year, but Amazon really clawed back volume, and this is market share war, Kim, and Amazon is winning it. And what I would just say is that even though Amazon is the largest by volume, FedEx and UPS are still ahead on revenue, and that's predominantly because they're handling also B2B deliveries and premium B2C, for example, which, as we know, has a far higher return per package than Amazon's predominantly lightweight B2C volumes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it remains a significant and unfolding story since the announcement a couple of months ago about Amazon coming into the broader market. How did Amazon get there so quickly, Matt?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, Kim. I mean, you have to go back about a decade. I mean, Amazon was almost entirely dependent on UPS, FedEx, and USPS at its peak. And it actually represented about a quarter of UPS's total volume there in the US. Now, if you think about that, 25% of your volume, that's a vulnerability. That's not a relationship. And when your largest supplier also controls your customer experience at the most critical moments of a sale, you have a problem. So Amazon decided to solve it. They launched what they call their DSP model, their delivery service partner model, in 2018, and that's recruiting small business owners, run fleets of Amazon branded vans, Amazon Flex, boarding gig workers, hub delivery, listed local shops. And they also recruited senior executives from DHL, FedEx, and others to build out the fast track of what they were trying to achieve. And by 2020, Amazon had surpassed FedEx in volume. 2022, it surpassed UPS, and as I mentioned, in 2025, last year, it crossed USPS as the largest. And now this is one of the most deliberate infrastructure builds in modern business history, certainly that I've seen, and there hasn't been a serious new entrant to shake up this market since FedEx launched in 1974, and that's over 50 years ago. So you can see the significance of what they've done.
Yeah, it's massive, really. I mean, what's the next for them, Matt? I mean, this has been unfolding now for some time, but what's the next steps, you think?
Well, they're certainly putting their money where their mouth is. They're investing. Last year announced a $4 billion investment to triple its rural network by the end of 2026. That's about 200 new delivery stations, 4,000 small towns. And so whilst other logistics providers are backing away from rural customers due to the cost of serve, Amazon is stepping in. And by early 2026, around 16% of Amazon customers were receiving same or next day delivery, and that's up from 8% the previous year. So Amazon has halved its rural delivery times in under 2 years, which is phenomenal. And I would just say too that the implication is profound. Amazon is building the infrastructure that USPS, under pressure from workforce reductions, facility consolidations, declining volumes, they're being forced to abandon. And once you own that last mile infrastructure in rural America, it's extraordinarily difficult and expensive for anyone else to displace you. So they are very strategic in their approach.
Wow. Yeah, the infrastructure is the name of the game, and especially in the US where there's such massive differences, huge outreach into different areas of the country, of course. What's been the reaction from UPS and FedEx, Matt?
Well, let's start with UPS. They've been around, as you know, since 1908 and have really had a stronghold on the US market. But in January 2025, they made a decision. They agreed to cut Amazon delivery volumes by more than 50% by the end of this year. And that's a deliberate strategic choice. I mean, we know, we talked about last mile before, driving a van into a suburb to drop off a $12 item simply wasn't profitable. And UPS, they're now concentrating on higher margin segments, B2B, healthcare, industrial, where their shipments can carry better revenue per package and there are denser stock patterns. So if you think in medical devices, aerospace components, automotive parts, I mean, another interesting piece that UPS have focused on is building out that mix of small and medium businesses, which now represents around 31% of UPS's volume, and that's the highest in a decade. And as we discussed before, SMEs are really, really very profitable. They've had some pain though, Kim. They've had to shed around 48,000 jobs last year, and revenue did decline. But they have positioned themselves well for the future, and the strategic logic looks sound. FedEx is actually executing a parallel pivot. Their similar approach, targeting healthcare, aerospace supply chains, premium e-commerce. They have a global network of over 220 countries, and which becomes increasingly valuable as companies diversify their supply chains, and they can expand internationally out of the US to support those customers. They surpassed UPS in market capitalization for the first time in March this year, and they've just spun off their FedEx Freight, which is the largest North American LTL carrier.
Yeah.
And that was just about a week and a half ago, and that separates their express and parcel business entirely. I will say, interestingly, FedEx did sign a new multi-year agreement or partnership with Amazon in May last year to handle a portion of their larger residential parcels. So even as Amazon internalizes more logistics, it still needs carriers for certain segments.
Sure, got it. Now, you mentioned LTL there, Matt. For those who are not familiar with aviation or express or logistics terms, what is LTL?
Yeah, less than trailer load. So it's not a full truck, okay. It's part of a truck, not a parcel, typically a few pallets in general.
Brilliant. So, Matt, I guess it begs the question, what does all this mean for the industry?
Well, look, Kim, yeah, I know. Look, I mean, having a look at it, I think there are three big themes here. First is the commoditization of last mile delivery. The residential last mile is becoming structurally low margin for traditional carriers. And we're seeing the same thing in geographically spread countries such as Canada and Australia as well. Amazon's model, which is built on their DSP contractors, gig workers, rather than unionised driver pools creates a cost per delivery saving that legacy carriers really cannot match without dismantling their own workforce agreements. But that said, this model is facing growing regulatory scrutiny, which is a bit of a headwind for Amazon, hasn't yet fully played out. The second theme I see is that the fragmentation of the carrier landscape. So Amazon's rise is opening space for alternative carriers below the big three. The smaller delivery companies have seen a 13% volume growth in 2025. And this is as shippers diversify away from UPS and FedEx price increases. Walmart and Target are also both building in-house delivery networks, and regional carriers are picking up contracts where the large big three don't really want to play. So it does create some complexity, but there are multi-carrier platforms out there which can merge these sort of suppliers and bundle them so that you can manage them more effectively. But that's basically where we are. And the third one, and I think this is getting to the essence of really what we're talking about, and it's a strategic question that no one can fully answer. I think what happens if Amazon opens its logistics network to third-party shippers at scale? Now, Amazon already moves third-party packages. Its parcel growth is partly fueled by contracts from companies that don't even sell on Amazon's marketplace. But if Amazon aggressively pursues the external logistics business, competing directly with UPS and FedEx for B2B or large multinational global contracts, the landscape will change dramatically. I think my read, and again, this is just my read, I think Amazon will move selectively into high volume e-commerce, but it won't chase B2B industrial or healthcare, for example, yet. I think the complexity and liability doesn't fit their model. I'll caveat that by saying that Amazon has a long history of entering markets observers said that they would never touch, but that's where I see it in the short term.
Jesus, it's never a truer word said than this part of the industry, the last mile, the express area, and of course since e-commerce became a really big thing about 15, 20 years ago, the change has been constant, right? It's just non-stop.
It has. Look, Amazon, without question, is the dominant parcel carrier by volume in the US last year. It built that position through patient infrastructure investment, and it's internalizing what it wants to outsource. But I will say that UPS and FedEx are not collapsing. They are adapting, and in my view, quite intelligently by retreating from low-margin residential volume and concentrating their networks and expertise where they can still command a premium. I think the real casualty may be the USPS, which, as I mentioned earlier, it's facing fiscal pressures, declining mail revenue, political constraints on pricing, and now a competitor that's building out its rural network station by station, which is where they really had a competitive advantage. And so the US postal market is expected to grow. But the question isn't whether a market grows, it's who captures that growth and on what terms.
Brilliant. Well, Matt, it's always, it's fascinating, Matt, and I really appreciate you giving us the input. So these latest developments you're just talking about there at the end, you're talking US there or you're talking global?
No, look, I'm talking US. I think if you look at other regions, particularly here in Australia, their investment in building infrastructure is significant. They're doing the same thing in Europe, and they are disrupting decades and decades of how things used to work from a supply chain perspective globally. So
Well, Matt, it's been a very fast 25 odd years that you were my first customer here in the Middle East. So all I can say is it doesn't seem that long, and the changes that have happened, specifically in the aviation market and express market, which we were both employed in. I think you were in DHL at the time, and I just left. TNT Ansett in New Zealand to set up this business. It has just been a constant route of change. But look, Matt Daniels, specialist consultant globally, based in Australia, but a specialist right around the world for a lot of tier one companies in the whole aviation express market. Thank you for putting all this information, the data. Opinions are great, but everybody loves data, and there's plenty there, Matt. And we're going to follow up and see how this story unfolds.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. And I think how this story unfolds in the US could be replicated globally, but time will tell.
Matt Daniels, all the way from Australia. Make sure you get out there for a round of golf today, Matt, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Logistics Executive TV.